Well, hello again, and welcome to our Wednesday devotion at Niles First Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. Happy St. Paddy's Day. As you can see, not only do I have my green on, but also my orange and white, uh, of course, for the hope of unity that's representative of the Irish flag. It is odd that we celebrate in the way that we do if you've already had a pint of green beer, remembering that in Ireland this is a solemn feast occasion, and what's really expected of you is to be in church. But since we're not having a worship service this afternoon, the best that I can do is speak a little bit about St. Patrick's Day and what St. Patrick was most famous for. We know from, there's a whole lot that we don't know actually about St. Patrick's Day, and a lot of scholars are in conversation about what's historically accurate and what has been part of the embellishment of his sanctification. But we do know, at least from his own autobiography, his confession, that at least he claims, St. Patrick did, that, and he was a missionary in the 5th century CE. He was captured. He lived in England, in Britain, and was captured by Irish pirates, and work as a shepherd in Ireland for several years, where he was able to develop language and customs, understand a little bit more about the folks around him for over several years before he actually escaped. On his way home back to Britain, he was interred. He was captured again, and was forced to live in France for a little bit of time, where he picked up some traditions of monasticism, of Christian monasticism in France. Finally made it back to Britain, only after some time to have a vision from God that called him back to Ireland to share good news. And it's during this time that a lot of myths develop around St. Patrick. He's credited with banishing snakes from Ireland, which is really interesting because most scientists believe that after the Ice Age, after the glacial period in Ireland, there weren't any snakes. It was too cold for any reptiles to survive. So there weren't any snakes anyway. That's like me taking credit for banishing all the mastodons out of Niles, Ohio. Who's to say I didn't? Either way, he's credited with a lot of other things that speak to his nature as a saint. It was said that his walking stick grew into a tree at one point, which takes some of the tradition around, say like Moses and Aaron's staff, which were able to perform miraculous feats as Moses stood against the Pharaoh. It was also said that St. Patrick was able to convert ancient Irish ancestors, some that he was able to have almost a holy encounter with, that allowed him to bring ancient pagans in Ireland, well-known warlords and part of the mythos of Ireland, into Christianity. He's probably most famous for using a shamrock to teach the nature of the Trinity. And y'all know every Trinity Sunday, and usually around St. Patrick's Day, if you encounter me, I love to have a conversation about the nature of the Trinity, and that's exactly where this is headed. Mostly because using the Trinity, using a shamrock to teach about the Trinity, it's actually teaching a heretical model. Using a shamrock, the 3 leaves, is actually a form of partialism. One of the difficulties about understanding the Trinity is that it is almost impossible to use an analogy or an illustration to define the nature of the Trinity. And the Trinity is an orthodox doctrine within Christianity that God is 3 persons and inherently one, that God is the creator, one person, indistinguishable as one essence, but are of 3 persons. It's confusing. And within the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, we have even some dialogue between some of our own theologians, some of our own founders, as to whether we are Trinitarian or Duotarian or Unitarian. basically if we believe in three persons or two persons or one person of the Godhead. And you might consider yourself as part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Remember, we're non-creedal. So nothing that we say, nothing that I tell you to believe really is necessary for your belief other than a following of the Christ. That's all that we stand on for admission into the church, that you follow Christ, that you love God. So you might be a Unitarian, you might be a Duitarian, you might be a Trinitarian. That's something for you to figure out. My job then is to allow you, like I said last week, to be in conversations with previous theologians and to be able to utilize the language and vocabulary of theology to be able to better define what it is that you believe yourself. So if you're a Trinitarian, well, it would be good if you were able to define that. And like I said, it is super tricky. And even some of our most common illustrations for the nature of the Trinity fall far short of the mystery of the Godhead. Using a three-leaf clover, again, is partialism, because even though one leaf might be representative of the Creator and one leaf might be representative of the Christ and one leaf might be representative of the Spirit, and though they are all inherently one piece, it is a form of partialism, because if you take one of the leaves off of the shamrock, you are left with a two-leaf shamrock. The leaf by itself is nothing without being connected to the entirety of the clover. So it falls short of explaining the inherent nature of our Godhead. Other heresies that work alongside this are modalism, the idea that the Creator and the Redeemer and the Sanctifier are made known to us as individual persons, that we know God as the Creator, that we know Christ as the Redeemer, that we know the Spirit as the Sanctifier, and they only perform these limited capacities, and each one is only able to work as that form. This I usually hear through an illustration of the nature of water or the nature of an apple. An apple consists of seeds and skin and flesh, but again, if you take them apart, they are... Oh, I'm sorry, the apple would be partialism. Water would be modalism, because water can be a gas, water can be a ice, water can be liquid. But it can only ever be, and I know some scientist somewhere is going to say that there's a tri-point of water, that they can actually be all things at once. But for the most part, we don't run into that issue. We see water in the three modes that it can be, and only ever see it as that one mode. But God can be all these things at the same time. God is not limited by the confines of physical space and time. God is not limited by the confines of physics and nature. So God can be all these things. God can be Creator at the same time as Redeemer, at the same time as Sanctifier, in the same way that as the person of Christ walked the earth, we were still able to experience God if we had lived in that time. Or, as the Spirit now is present with us, we still know that there is the person of the Christ and the person of the Creator. They are available at all times and in all places. You run into other issues that try to nitpick some of the nature of the Trinity. When we run into Docetism is a well-known heresy that Jesus was really divine and not human at all, and it was just our perception that got skewed there. Ebionitism, Jesus was only human and not divine at all. Maybe a really good human, but not divine. Macedonianism, that the Spirit was created. Arianism, that Christ was the first of creation, but still a creation. And these are heretical because the orthodox doctrine of Trinitarianism would say that all three are not created. We have in some creeds that Christ was begotten and not created. That is to say that all three persons of the Godhead, the Creator, the Christ, the Spirit, were all eternally present one with one another throughout the existence of time. So the idea that one of them was created or that Christ and the Spirit were created falls into heretical territory. Or, of course, the other heresy that we would look at would be tritheism, and just that there's three gods working together. So in Orthodox Trinitarianism, which is a difficult concept to understand and to teach and to preach, my goodness, the idea is that all of them are one. All were inherently in one nature with each other and have been throughout time and space, that there is no limitations to these. They were not created, that God didn't speak into existence the Christ or the Spirit, and that they are all inherently one. One good book that does an excellent job of explaining this, and it's difficult to read because it's dealing with the Trinity. Jürgen Moltmann's, let me see if I can get this right here, Trinity and the Kingdom. This is one of my favorite books that speaks on Trinity, and I have tried to read it several times, and I've gotten through various degrees of it each time that I've been able to read it. But one of the quotes that, and Jürgen Moltmann does a wonderful job of developing Trinitarian theology and doctrine. He's really credited with coming up with a social Trinitarianism that I think most of us would know more readily if you've read The Shack. The relationship that the Godhead has in The Shack, and even though it's taking liberties and it's writing in a fictional style, it does a good job, The Shack does, of explaining the intimate working relationship between the Creator, the Christ, and the Spirit. That they have a perfect, loving relationship. Moltmann lays this down in a lot of ways in this book. One of the quotes that I would take from this book, if you want to, and of course, like all the books in my office, if any of the members of Niles First Christian Church ever want to borrow it for some light reading, we can check you out. Moltmann's The Trinity and the Kingdom. You're more than welcome to. But one of the quotes that I take from this book that I find helpful in my quest to try and understand what the nature of the Trinity is, he says, modern reason be described as the desire to conquer and dominate. For the Greek philosophers and the fathers of the church, knowing meant something different. It meant knowing in wonder. By knowing or perceiving, one participates in the life of the other. Here, knowing does not transform the counterpart into the property of the knower. The knower does not appropriate what he knows. On the contrary, he is transformed through sympathy, becoming a participant in what he perceives. What Moltmann is saying here is that so much of what we view as knowledge now is meant to control or subdue. We try to figure everything out about theology so that we can have a handle on God. We try to figure out everything about the way the world works so that we can subjugate and dominate it, as the creation myth tells us. What knowledge has been, what knowledge is too often now, is our desperate need to understand so that we have control. What Moltmann says of past concepts of knowledge is that knowing something meant to be participating in its wonder. To know something, you have to be in relationship with it. And this is how one way that Moltmann lays out this social Trinitarian doctrine. By knowing something about another person, or by knowing something about God, we know a little bit more about what makes that person, or what makes that divine nature more readily available to us. We participate in the life and in the moments of those that we know. And in knowing something about someone else, it is not an opportunity for dominion, but rather for sympathy. Because in knowing something more about another person, or knowing something more about the way God has revealed God's self to us, in that intimate knowledge, we have an opportunity for more profound relationship. And really, that is something that is worth us understanding about the nature of the Trinity, because it allows us to develop a better understanding of how to work with each other. When we see, if you are a Trinitarian, when we see the intimate relationship, the working relationship between the Creator and the Christ and the Spirit, we have a better understanding of how we are called to be with one another, that we are called truly, in knowing other people, to better serve them, to be able to better understand, can meet their needs more readily, that we can empathize with their hurts, that we can know what makes them tick so that we can take care of each other better. when we understand, whether you're a Unitarian, a Duitarian, a Trinitarian, you see that something about the way that God reveals God's self to us calls us to treat each other better, to be in better relationship with one another. And while that might completely confuse you about the nature of the Trinitarian Godhead, or while it might call you into question whether you are a Trinitarian, a Duitarian, or Unitarian, because it's probably not something you think about too frequently, I would challenge you. What I hope to do with these devotions is continue to raise questions about your own personal faith life that might allow you to define it a little more readily, to understand more about what you think about yourself and what you think about your relationship with God. I will say that one of the most clear, explicitly clear concepts of Trinitarian doctrine is found in the Athanasian Creed. This creed, commonly known as Trinitarian Creed. And again, we're non-creedal, but the language of theologians that have come before us might allow us to understand a little bit more about ourselves. So I read you to this creed, not that you might take it as literal truth, but that you might have a better understanding of the way that you walk with God. So this Athanasian Creed reads that we worship one God in Trinity, and Trinity in unity, neither blending their persons nor dividing their essence. For the person of the Father is a distinct person, the person of the Son is another, and that of the Holy Spirit still another. But the divinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit is one, their glory equal, their majesty co-eternal. What quality the Father has, the Son has, and the Holy Spirit has. The Father is uncreated, the Son uncreated, the Holy Spirit is uncreated. The Father is immeasurable, the Son is immeasurable, the Holy Spirit is immeasurable. Hopefully, some of this information from St. Patrick to Jürgen Moltmann to the Athanasian Creed might give you some better understanding of what it is that you believe, and might make that walk with God ever more close and intimate. Wherever you find yourself today, may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields, and until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of God's hand.